can't hear me. The reason you can't hear me is because you're firing your mortar at your end and they're dropping here at our end.
Kelly's Heroes looks like a crazy war comedy, but the story behind the cameras is wilder than anything on screen. From near-death on set to actual U.S. government cover-ups, this film was one of the most chaotic productions in Hollywood history. And once you know what really happened, you will never watch it the same way again. Fact 1. The gold robbery at the heart of the film is not pure fiction, and that is exactly what the U.S. government would prefer you not to think about. Screenwriter Troy Kennedy Martin based the story on a real entry in the Guinness Book of World Records titled The Greatest Robbery on Record, which described the theft of German national gold reserves in 1945 by a combination of U.S. military personnel and German civilians. The heist was worth an estimated $2.5 billion, subsequently covered up by the U.S. government, and was the subject of a lengthy investigation published in the book Nazi Gold by Ian Sayer and Douglas Botting. Real stolen Nazi gold, real American soldiers, real cover-up, and Hollywood turned it into a comedy that ran in cinemas worldwide. The truth was hiding in plain sight in a record book for over a decade before anyone made a movie out of it. Fact 2.
Let's go.
All right, move on.
Eastwood did not choose this film. He was outmaneuvered into it by a contractual technicality. He only agreed to sign on because his close friend Don Siegel, director of Dirty Harry, was attached to direct. Siegel ran into serious post-production problems, finishing Two Mules for Sister Sarah, and had to withdraw from Kelly's Heroes entirely. By the time Siegel pulled out, Eastwood had already signed a binding contract and could not follow him. Brian G. Hutton was brought in as replacement director, and Eastwood was stuck. He later expressed deep disappointment with how the film was handled, but not before delivering one of the most enduring performances of his career. Fact 3.
You could probably use some armor.
What are you doing up there?
Donald Sutherland arrived in Yugoslavia for what was supposed to be a single day of work and ended up in a coma fighting for his life. Within hours of arriving on set, he contracted spinal meningitis, a potentially fatal infection that causes inflammation around the brain and spinal cord. There were no antibiotics available on location, and Sutherland slipped into a coma. A telegram was sent to his wife warning her to travel to Yugoslavia immediately, and that her husband would probably be dead before she arrived. She came anyway. Sutherland survived after 6 weeks in a hospital bed and went on to spend 6 months on set, ultimately calling the role one of the defining experiences of his entire career. His first day nearly killed him. His last day left him in love with the character. Fact 4. While Donald Sutherland was lying in a Yugoslav hospital barely clinging to life, his wife Shirley Douglas was across the Atlantic walking straight into an FBI operation. Douglas attempted to purchase hand grenades from an undercover FBI agent for the Black Panthers, using a personal check. Sutherland received the news during filming, delivered by co-star Clint Eastwood. According to Sutherland, when Eastwood reached the detail about the personal check, he laughed so hard he collapsed to his knees. Eastwood then put his arm around Sutherland, walked him down a hill overlooking the Yugoslav countryside, and told him he had his full support. Sutherland and Douglas divorced that same year. The story has become one of Hollywood's most frequently retold on-set anecdotes. Fact 5.
Take it easy, take it easy, take it easy. Okay, hold it, hold it.
The entire production moved to a country that no longer exists, for one very specific reason. By 1969, the Yugoslav army still had a large stockpile of operational M4 Sherman tanks left over from World War II, making it the only viable location in the world where the filmmakers could access the authentic equipment the script demanded. Getting real Sherman tanks anywhere else would have been logistically impossible and financially catastrophic. There was also a second reason. Yugoslav law at the time prohibited domestic film studios from profiting from screenings, which meant the production company faced no revenue-sharing obligations and had significantly more money to work with. A Cold War communist nation turned out to be the most cost-effective place to make an American World War II comedy. Fact 6. The fearsome Tiger tanks that dominate the film's climactic battle are not German at all. They are a Soviet optical illusion. The production could not locate authentic Tiger I tanks anywhere, so the art department took Russian T-34s and modified them to look like Tigers. The deception is visible if you know what to look for. Tiger tanks used a distinctive overlapping wheel system, while the T-34s in the film retained their original Christie suspension, a completely different design. Military historians have been pointing this out for decades. The film's climactic three-way showdown between Eastwood, Sutherland, and a tank that is pretending to be something it is not became one of the most beloved sequences in the movie. Nobody in the general audience ever noticed. Fact 7. The production's tank problem was solved. Its aircraft problem was not. The American fighter that attacks Kelly's group during the film is actually a Soko 522, a two-seat Yugoslav military trainer jet that did not make its first flight until 1955, a full 11 years after the events depicted in the film. A 1944 World War II battle scene features a plane that was not built until the mid-1950s, flying in skies controlled by an army it never served. The filmmakers used whatever Yugoslav military hardware was available, regardless of historical accuracy. Audiences accepted it without question because the film moves fast enough that nobody stopped to check the serial numbers. Fact 8.
This man is the man I have on my mind today. And I'll tell you who he is.
The version of Kelly's Heroes that audiences saw in theaters was not the film its director or its star believed they had made. MGM studio chief James T. Aubrey, nicknamed the Smiling Cobra, cut approximately 20 minutes and 8 full scenes before theatrical release. Among the deleted material was a pivotal late-night scene in which Kelly and Big Joe sit together and talk honestly about their disillusionment with the war and Kelly's demotion. The scene that would have given the entire story its emotional core. Eastwood later said repeatedly in interviews that the cuts removed the depth from every character and reduced what could have been a serious anti-war statement into a routine action comedy. He compared what he had hoped to make to Catch-22, released the same year, and was furious with what the studio delivered. The film you know is the truncated version of a far more ambitious one. Fact 9. Donald Sutherland's character Oddball is set in 1944 World War II and was unmistakably designed to look, sound, and behave like a 1969 anti-Vietnam War protester. Sutherland himself was a real and vocal opponent of the Vietnam War at the time of filming, having recently completed MASH, in which he played another military figure who was clearly a stand-in for Vietnam-era disillusionment. Oddball's long hair, philosophical rambling, contempt for authority, and insistence on positive vibrations were all deliberate anachronisms. A hippie dropped into a World War II film to comment on a war that was killing people as the cameras rolled. The character was not a joke. He was a message dressed in comedy clothes. Sutherland said the role inhabited him completely and that he would not have changed a single moment of it. Fact 10. One of Hollywood's future major directors was working as a production assistant on Kelly's Heroes and quietly inserted himself into a background scene wearing a habit. John Landis, who would go on to direct Animal House, The Blues Brothers, and An American Werewolf in London, was a junior crew member during production. He made a cameo appearance in the film as one of 3 nuns visible in a background crowd scene. Landis also struck up a friendship with Donald Sutherland on set, telling the actor that he intended to become a director. Sutherland later appeared in multiple Landis films, including Animal House and the Kentucky Fried Movie. The director who would define the comedy of the late 1970s spent part of 1969 dressed as a nun in Yugoslavia. Fact 11. Kelly's Heroes almost had a female member in its outlaw platoon, and the actress found out she had lost the part in the most brutal way possible. Ingrid Pitt, the British-Polish actress best known for her Hammer horror films, was cast in the original script as the sole woman among the group of soldiers. She was booked, contracted, and preparing to board a plane to Yugoslavia when she received a phone call informing her that her character had been cut from the film entirely. She did not take the news quietly. The decision to remove the female character from the script reflected a broader studio anxiety about the film's identity. A heist story, a war story, a comedy, and in cutting Pitt, they also cut the dynamic that would have given the ensemble its most unexpected element. Fact 12. The film that audiences eventually saw as Kelly's Heroes had been known by two other names during its journey from script to screen. The original working title was The Warriors, a straightforward label that reflected the film's early conception as a more serious war story. During post-production, it was retitled Kelly's Warriors, before the decision was ultimately made to go with Kelly's Heroes in order to better signal the film's comic tone to audiences. MGM also reworked the title's marketing by leaning into the irony of calling a group of gold-thieving deserters heroes. 3 titles, 3 different ideas about what kind of movie this was, and the version that survived was the one furthest from what its director and lead actor had envisioned. Fact 13.
They all tried to tell me, but I guess I didn't care.
The man responsible for the music of Dirty Harry composed the entire score for Kelly's Heroes, a fact that connects the two films through one of the most distinctive musical voices of the era. Lalo Schifrin, creator of the Mission Impossible theme, wrote, arranged, and conducted every note of the Kelly's Heroes soundtrack, including the main theme built around the song Burning Bridges, performed by the Mike Curb Congregation. Burning Bridges reached number 34 on the Billboard Hot 100, spent 2 weeks at number 1 in both Australia and New Zealand, and topped the charts in the South Africa for 5 weeks. The soundtrack was not released in a complete version until a Film Score Monthly expanded edition in 2005, 35 years after the film came out. Schifrin's work on 2 of the defining films of 1970 went largely uncelebrated until long after both were considered classics. Fact 14.
No, move! Oh, no, move!
The blowhard, glory-hungry General Colt, who spends the entire film accidentally following Kelly's platoon into battle while believing they are heroic, is played by Carroll O'Connor, 1 year before he became one of the most famous characters in television history. O'Connor's performance as the pompous, oblivious general is a masterclass in comic authority, and it demonstrated precisely the timing and conviction he would deploy as Archie Bunker in All in the Family beginning in 1971. General Colt and Archie Bunker share almost nothing in terms of setting or circumstance, but both are men who are absolutely certain they understand a situation they have completely misread. O'Connor understood that character instinctively, and Kelly's Heroes gave him the big screen showcase that led directly to the role that changed American television. Fact 15. The film's most beloved sequence, the 3-way standoff between Eastwood, the German Tiger commander, and the gold-filled bank, was designed as an explicit, loving parody of the famous Mexican standoff from Sergio Leone's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Director Brian Hutton deliberately staged the confrontation as a spaghetti western showdown, complete with close-ups of eyes, hands hovering near weapons, and musical cues that consciously imitated Ennio Morricone's iconic score. Eastwood, who had starred in all 3 of Leone's Dollars films, played the scene with the same squinting intensity he had used 5 years earlier against Lee Van Cleef. The joke was obvious to anyone who knew Eastwood's career. Those who did not know it still got the tension. The scene works on both levels simultaneously. Fact 16. The ending of Kelly's Heroes contains one of the most quietly subversive moments in any war film of its era. Rather than defeating the final German Tiger commander in battle, Kelly walks forward and offers him an equal share of the gold to blast open the bank doors. The German accepts. 2 armies, technically at war, negotiate a business deal and walk away richer together, while the American generals are still congratulating themselves on what they believe was a military breakthrough. The scene was intended as a direct comment on what the war in Vietnam was increasingly looking like to the generation watching the film in 1970. A conflict built on institutional illusion, conducted by people with no stake in the outcome, while those actually doing the fighting quietly arranged their own terms. No studio executive apparently read it that way. It ran uncensored worldwide. Fact 17.
Friends all tried to warn me, but I held my head up high.
Burning Bridges, the melancholy folk song that opens and closes Kelly's Heroes, became an international hit that outlasted the film's original theatrical run by decades. Written by Lalo Schifrin with lyrics by Mike Curb, who also served as Lieutenant Governor of California from 1978 to 1982, the song charted across 4 continents and reached #1 in Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. A recording of Clint Eastwood himself singing Burning Bridges was released as a single on Saturn Records, with a Chris Christopherson song on the B-side. The song's tone is not triumphant or heroic. It is mournful and reflective, about roads not taken and decisions that cannot be undone. For a film about men stealing gold during a war, it is a strangely poignant piece of music, and its popularity suggests that audiences heard something in it that the marketing never intended to sell them. Fact 18. Kelly's Heroes and MASH were both released in 1970, both starred Donald Sutherland, and both used the framework of a previous war to comment on Vietnam without being allowed to say so directly. MASH premiered in January and Kelly's Heroes followed in June, meaning Sutherland spent an extraordinary year as the defining face of anti-establishment war comedy. Both films featured military protagonists who operated outside the rules, mocked their commanding officers, and treated the institution of war itself as something between a bureaucratic absurdity and a moral catastrophe. Together, they represent the moment Hollywood decided it could no longer pretend that war movies were straightforward heroism. Kelly's Heroes did it with tanks and gold. MASH did it with surgeons and cocktails. The result in both cases was the same. The audience left with serious doubts about the people giving the orders. Fact 19. Almost every name in Kelly's Heroes was chosen to signal something about the character, and Don Rickles' supply sergeant was no exception. Crap game is the military slang for a dice game, and the name perfectly captures the character's essential nature. A man for whom everything in war is a transaction, a negotiation, an angle to be worked. Sergeant Mulligan, played by George Savalas, has a name drawn from golf terminology where a mulligan is a do-over, a second chance after a mistake. Even the division patches worn by the characters are historically accurate. Kelly's crosshair shoulder patch identifies him as a member of the real 35th Infantry Division, which was operating in the Nancy, France area in late summer 1944. The film casually embedded genuine military history into every frame while playing it entirely for comedy. Fact 20. Kelly's Heroes was released on June 23, 1970, received decent reviews, made respectable money, and then did something unusual. It got more popular every decade. Through television broadcasts and home video, the film found audiences that the theatrical run never reached, particularly among soldiers and veterans who recognized in it something no straight war film ever captured. It is simultaneously a heist movie, a Vietnam-era protest film, a spaghetti western parody, a comedy, and a surprisingly honest portrait of men who have stopped pretending that the mission means anything beyond survival. Eastwood never made the film he wanted to make. Sutherland nearly died making it. The studio cut the parts that mattered most, and yet the version that survived all of that became something none of them planned. A film that tells the truth about war by pretending not to be about war at all.